This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the US. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
The Record Show, I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend, colleague, Jesse Garcia. Jesse's Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Republican Party. With us is Tim Hoefer, who's the President and CEO of one of the great think tanks of public policy in the United States and in New York. It's called the Empire Center for Public Policy. Jesse and I are very happy to have you with us today. Tim, thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Let me start off, Jesse, because you were under the weather last week, and I see your voice is still a little problematic, by saying congratulations on your great victory out on Long Island. You and your colleagues in Suffolk County and Nassau County, Joe Cairo, the county chair of Nassau, did a wonderful, wonderful job of bringing checks and balances to government and to making Long Island a very strong force against the tides of what I call disruption and destruction in the state. So congratulations, Jesse.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I mean, it was a long night and a long campaign, but a campaign that ends with or culminates with the election of the ninth county executive in Suffolk's history being Republican, the first one in 20 years. And then not only maintaining the Republican majority, the first Republican majority in 16 years, but actually gaining a seat and now having a supermajority on the legislature. It truly is a testament that the voters of Suffolk County are in line and trust the Republican values and the Republican standard bearers. And I believe that with that trust comes great responsibility. And I know that Ed Romaine and the Republican-led supermajority in the legislature, will do everything possible and implement those policies under the Romaine plan for a safer, more affordable Suffolk. And, I know everyone likes to do some stats here and there. This is the first time the Republicans have held the county executive and the supermajority in the Suffolk County legislature since 1996.
Well, I think that's great. Tim, so you are one of the great policy wonks in the entire state of New York and across the country, and you have legislative experience in the state legislature. But what I want to ask you about is this, and Jesse and I talk about this a lot. Jesse and I are very concerned about the future of New York State and New York City. My view is that the major problems facing this state include, but as we say in the law business, include but not limited to great population loss of the most productive citizens, economic and financial crises, the numbers of the deficit, both in the city of New York and the state of New York, are overwhelming. We have lawlessness now of streets in terms of the crime issue. We have a surging illegal immigration population, which is now brought the Arab streets because of illegal immigration and over-tolerance for people who would destroy us into our streets in this great state and across the country. We have all these left-wing social mandates. And frankly, while Jesse and I and the people we talk with like to be optimistic, there's a loss of faith in the future by a lot of the people. What are your thoughts on this, Tim?
Well, we've talked about this before, Judge. I think part of what we need to be thinking about is these problems you describe are all self-inflicted. This isn't, these aren't weather-based problems. This isn't a problem of evolution. It's not a problem that we can't control, right? These are policy decisions that come out of Albany or City Hall or wherever the case may be. So when I think about, am I optimistic about the future? Am I hopeful for what's to come? You and I both agree political winds are a pendulum that's going to go up and it's going to come back down and they're going to shift. So the real question that we struggle with a lot when we think about, is there hope for New York? How can we make it better? It's a question of when. When is it going to change? And can things change, and will they change before it's too late? Before all of those taxpayers leave, before all of the jobs are gone, before you reach a really, really a crisis point that you cannot come back from. And I agree that there's lots of crises in front of us, right? And so the question to answer is not if it'll get better, because I think eventually it'll get better. It's the question of when and how do we get there. That's what we struggle with on a day-to-day basis.
And what do you see? So I have my list, but what do you see above everything else as we're going forward, coming into a new year? It's going to be a presidential election year. But what do you see as the biggest problem facing New York State now? And what should we be doing about it?
I wish we were in a position where there was just a biggest problem. I think there are probably three things that you could hone in on. The primary one is a tax and regulatory scheme that is unfriendly to and unproductive for business creation and job creation. So that's a huge one. The second is the state plan to, quote, fix the environment. So the CLCPA, the big green energy deal that is being implemented
what
now.
Jessie and I describe as the green energy obsession.
Yeah, right. So that and the implications of that are so huge and far-reaching. You actually can't overstate how big it is. And the third one is the public education system in New York, because if we're not fixing that now, if we're not creating better results now, we're not going to get there. We're not going to have the workforce, the manpower, the population for when and if things do get better. So I think that's the trifecta of issues we need to confront.
Jesse.
It's great to have you. Thank you so much, Tim, for being here, and of course, of your role in the Empire Policy Group. One of the issues that we've always talked about is how, the very basic issue for society is safety. How do you view, with those three issues that you just pointed out, the issue of public safety? Someone in New York City, feeling about their own personal safety here, and that the changes in law basically handcuff cops and judges, yet give a free pass to criminals. And, how much of that plays a role in the decision of corporations, small businesses, and families and residents, calling New York City and New York home?
Yeah, I personally, I think it plays a huge part in it. But even if it doesn't, again, I think this is the whole symphony of issues that you think about every day when you choose whether or not you're going to stay in New York. We often talk about there's a cliff. Every person or business or corporation or whatever that's in New York has a cliff. And then once they reach that cliff and they fall off, that means they leave. Maybe it's the estate tax. Maybe it's their personal safety. Maybe it's their ability to choose where their children go to school. We don't know what those are, but the ones that we could fix, we should be fixing so that we don't afford them the opportunity to find that cliff and leave. So I think public safety is a huge one. You certainly are feeling it here in the city, and you're feeling it in other places in the state. And so, again, if we're not confronting that head on, and I don't know how we get to a point where we can tell people, you should stay here, right? That is one of many, many things that they're thinking about every day when they think about the best place for them and their families to live, to relocate to, whatever.
Just one follow-up. Have we hit that cliff for the average New Yorker, for the average Long Islander? I mean, we've seen a mass exodus. I think it's in the area somewhere between 500 and 600,000 residents have voted with their feet, leaving New York State. We've lost 2 congressional seats. Our population is shrinking. It's growing in other parts of the country, whether it be the Carolinas, Texas, Florida. Do you think that we're at that cliff? Or not over it already? Yeah,
no, I think that's my point, is that everybody has their own cliff, right? And so literally hundreds of thousands of people have already hit and fallen over the cliff and left. We lost 2 congressional seats. It would be much, much higher if we didn't have foreign immigration the way that we do, right? So the people who are leaving, who are much higher earners than the people who are coming in, have a disproportionate impact on, among many other things, the tax base, which means that we're now collecting more money from more people at lower levels than we were in the past. All of this compounds. So yeah, Jesse, I think hundreds of thousands of people have hit and fallen off their cliff. That's why they're not here anymore. And I think many, many more are right on the precipice of it. They're right there. They're about to fall off of it, and we're not going to get multiple chances to bring them back.
I think, gentlemen, the real problem is that you have people in control of my party, the Democratic Party, the so-called Democratic Socialists, the Working Families Party. They have this ideology which has nothing to do with reality, and it permeates all the questions that the three of us have been talking about. And until you get a countervailing force to stop this drive, this ideological drive, that they must impose their will on the population, and everybody else has to eat it, the choice is going to be, Jesse and Tim, can I stand it? Is it a reason enough to keep me here? Or do I just want to walk away from it because it's no longer worth it? Without a countervailing voice of common sense and sanity, I think the state is lost. I think the city is lost. I mean, Long Island, Jesse, may be the last bastion. And if they're successful, by the way, Jesse, in trying to roll in the local elections into the even number years, I'm very concerned about the future of the suburbs. What do you say on that, Jesse?
Well, number one, on that issue, I believe that they're trying to suppress the vote and suppress the issues important to Long Islanders, New Yorkers by taking local issues and local elections and placing them in national elections. Where we're thinking about Ukraine, we're thinking the Israeli-Gaza war instead of we're thinking about who's picking up my garbage, who is paving my roads and such, and who's keeping the cops on the beat. But I do think that it will be turbulent if that occurs, and there'll be litigation. We're going to fight that for the voices of Long Island and for voices of local government. We have to. It's imperative that we do that because it's that important, because it affects the daily lives of our residents more so than anything else. But I also do believe that you have committees, the Suffolk County Republican Committee, its partners in the Conservative Party, the same for my good friend Joe Cairo, the Nassau County Republican Chairman, and his partners in the Conservative Party, and throughout the state, that we will adapt. And we've done that. We will adapt, and it will shake out, and we will do what needs to be done to protect those local voices and those local office holders that affect directly every minute and every hour of every day of the lives of our residents. But it's going to take litigation. And again, it's that act of rolling local elections into even years, into national and statewide emphasized elections is nothing more than the continuation of Albany one-party progressive Democrats and them manipulating the electoral process because they're being beaten at the ballot box, including in New York City, where historically, for the first time in 25 years, a Bronx council district has gone Republican. It's been flipped. Here on Long Island and throughout upstate New York, they have no choice, but they see that there's no choice other than manipulate the electoral system because their ideas are flawed. And I have one question for maybe both of you. Tim, you've worked in the state legislature. You lobbied the legislature. You've also worked up there. Your Honor, you were the city council. You were counsel to the city president. I'm the president of the city council.
Speaker.
So, Speaker. Sorry, I apologize. Speaker.
Can't take that away. Speaker.
Yeah, I will not. We have presiding officers. You have speakers.
Right.
But at one point or another, when you're sitting in your majority caucuses or you're dealing with majority caucuses, doesn't a light bulb go off in their head that what we're doing is killing our brand? It's killing our constituencies. We're replacing, an earning population, an entrepreneurial population that builds our tax base and replacing it with one that drains our governmental resources and revenues. Doesn't that go off in their head? Isn't there some common sense in their heads that what we've been doing for political purposes to appease this political group or this extreme group or this progressive is killing our state? That there's not a light bulb that goes on?
I'd like to believe that there is. I mean, I think what you're describing, Jesse, is this is the squeaky wheel principle. The loudest person, the one making the most noise, is the one that gets a response. And that's fine. That's basically what lobbying is, right? On the other hand, there is no other side. Nobody is fighting on behalf of the other argument, and whether that's apathy from the electorate or whether it's just lack of coordination or know-how or anything else. The problem isn't that there's one group out there advocating, it's that they're winning because there isn't any kind of formal resistance from the base of what I think is probably a silent majority somewhere closer to the middle.
All right, we have to take a break. We'll be back in a few moments with Let the Record Show for more interesting conversation. With us is Tim Hoefer, the president and the CEO of the Empire Center for Public Policy, the leading think tank in New York State, and a great commentator on these issues. With me is Jessie Garcia as well, the vice chair of the State Republican Party and county chair of Suffolk County. We'll be back in a moment with more of Let the Record Show.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor, or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injuries and additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jessie Garcia.
We're back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jessie Garcia, the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Our distinguished guest, our very distinguished guest, is Tim Hoefer, the president and CEO of the Empire Center for Public Policy, the leading think tank in New York State. I want to turn our attention to a case that's literally being argued today in the New York Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in the state, and that's the redistricting case. So let me give a little background for our listeners. There were new lines drawn because every 10 years you have to redraw lines for the legislature and for the United States House of Representatives. And as a result of, from all kinds of gimmicks and games that the Democratic Party was playing, particularly the legislative leadership, and particularly Senator Generis of Queens, what they did is they violated the constitutional mandates. They did what they wanted to do. There was litigation, went all the way up to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals said they acted wrongfully. They appointed a special master. The lines were drawn. Instead of having gerrymandered districts where the Republicans only had a chance to win 4 seats, they wound up winning 11. The significance of that, ladies and gentlemen of our audience, is that is a reason why the United States House of Representatives was under the leadership of the Republican Party. It's a reason why you had these investigations, which would have been hidden, buried, and covered up against the Biden influence peddling scandals through 3 major House committees. That's how that happened. So you had, what we were talking about before in the earlier segment, checks and balances, a countervailing force in the Republican Party. This case today has enormous significance because if the Democrats are successful in overturning the lines, and under the state constitution, again, it's clear in the state constitution, the lines that were drawn by a special master should be for the whole 10-year cycle and not for an ad hoc 2-year cycle. But if they change that and the Democrats are able to gerrymander and fix the process, then what happens? Then the United States Representatives, House of Representatives, can fall into Democratic hands, and there goes balanced government in our federal government. Tim, what do you say?
I don't think you're wrong about any of that. And I think it's important to know, if you go all the way back to the beginning of this redistricting process, I'm not a conspiracy guy generally, but I think that the cat's been in the bag or out of the bag or whatever that is since day one, right? If you recall, the legislature had to be sued to fund the commission that was to draw the lines all the way back before this process even started. And so when they did do that, and obviously the lawsuit was successful and the commission was funded, and then immediately the new lines came out and they were at a dead heat. They didn't do, I mean, from day one and every step along the way, it's been clear, and it's even been admitted to by legislators on the Democratic side, that they feel that they have a right to gerrymander the seats. And so political ramifications of what happens if the Democrats are successful in this suit or not, the entire thing is just, it's gross. I don't think there's a more eloquent way to say it. Like, it's just gross.
And the editorials across the state have pointed out that it would be gross. And Jesse, what are your thoughts on this case?
I think that this case is nothing more than a continuation. Actually, I think this is a continuation of even back to 2014 when Democrats in control were going against the referendum that established the independent commission on redistricting. And it's been a plan that's been in play since that point and was critical for them when the state Senate was lost in 2018 in that midterm election. This is nothing more. And in the first segment, we talked about this continued obsession or plan to manipulate the electoral process by progressive Democrats in Albany. They don't want to play by the rules. This is clearly a view where they want to change the rules, change the lines so that they can seek an electoral benefit here. And I mean, nothing more can be said. And, you know, you can take a Republican leader's point of view and say, okay, it's skewed and such. You can say that I'm partisan. But when you have someone, Jeffrey Weiss, who is a New York law school professor, was quoted in saying that New York is being looked at as one state that can provide more congressional opportunities. Think about that. Here's a law professor from New York Law School saying that New York is being looked at as more congressional opportunities, a political issue, and that each of these court battles matter as Democrats try to win back their majority. That's a law professor in one of the more liberal law schools that there are in the country right now, basically telling the people of this state what the plan is. This is not a Republican. This is not a partisan. And I mean, that sentiment is echoed in the editorial pages of tens of newspapers, both right-leaning, moderate, and left-leaning throughout the state, saying that this gerrymandering is going too far. This was the law of the land in 2022. It was an overreach by Democrats that was smacked back by the highest court in the state of New York, the Court of Appeals. It cost the Chief Justice her job at that race because she brought fairness, transparency, and integrity to this decision. And now what we see here is nothing more than backroom politics being played out at the expense of the integrity and the fairness of the institution, an institution of government such as the judiciary and the Court of Appeals.
Well, as a lawyer, as a former judge, I'm very concerned about the reputation of the judicial system, and particularly the Court of Appeals. Historically, the New York Court of Appeals was one of the great courts in our country. In fact, way back when, it used to be the belief that the New York Court of Appeals was the leading bench in the entire country, including the United States Supreme Court. And so when Benjamin Cardozo, who had been chief judge of the Court of Appeals, left to go on to the Supreme Court of the United States, people say, why would you give up being chief judge in the New York Court of Appeals to go on the Supreme Court? You're on a better court. And that's not a joke. That was the wisdom of the time. So I believe, in my humble opinion, that the reputation of the court itself and the respect for the dignity and the fairness of the judicial system is part of this case. If they don't do the right thing, I think the reputation is going to be enormously damaged, and that's not good for a society that doesn't believe in fair and even-handed justice. Tim, what do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that everything is on the line in the outcome of this case for the court and its credibility moving forward.
All right. Let me switch gears. I want to talk about what I call the green energy obsession with Jesse. I think it's unworkable, and I think it's dangerous. It's dangerous for America. It's certainly dangerous for New York State. Another way of looking at this is, I call it the arrogance of statism and industrial policy. They have decided, as a matter of politics and public policy, Tim and Jesse, that they're going to tell us what kind of stove we can have. They're going to tell us what kind of lawnmower we can have, what kind of car we can drive, what kind of heating system we can have. They're influencing the way we live. So for the progressives to say that the Republicans are somehow interfering with democracy, nobody asked me if I want to have an electric car and no other car. I believe in the free market. I don't believe in state policy dictated by political leftists or rightists. Let me have the car I want. If you want to make electric cars, get an electric car. If the manufacturers want to make them, it's in their interest to make them. If I don't want to have an electric car, it's my choice. Don't tell me by a certain year that I'm not going to be able to buy a car in the state of New York that's a gas-fueled car. Tim.
Yeah, we've done, certainly the folks in our shop have done a ton of work on this subject, and often when we pick up a new issue area, it's because we think that we need an opposing viewpoint. In the case of this, it's because it needed a viewpoint. So this is a plan without any plan. There wasn't a scoping plan for 2 years. There wasn't a cost. There still isn't a way in which we're going to make it. It is a political aspiration. So does anybody disagree that we should find a way to be friendlier to the environment? I don't think so. I disagree with doing it in a way that's going to cost jobs and homes and products and businesses, and probably isn't going to work at the end of the day. A big part of this is, do we want to get to that point where we've reduced greenhouse gas emissions? Absolutely. Do we want to do it in a way that's going to cost your neighbors your job and you your house, and not be able to, if you can't have power, right? The plan itself literally calls for there being a 10% of energy deficit if everything is done correctly. And I just let that sink in. If a government program is run 100% right, we won't have energy 10% of the time. So there's no way this works.
What do we do?
The answer, I think, is fairly simple. The answer is let the free market work, as you just brought up, Judge. Let the market develop the technology and the products that we're going to need on their own timeline. Don't put an arbitrary time limit on getting to these goals. You could be aspirational. The governor could say, yes, I want to get there. Yes, I want this to happen. And yes, I'm going to encourage it. But to actually make it so that you can't buy things, you can't replace your stove, that you can't get a gas furnace, especially when the infrastructure isn't going to exist to allow that to happen, is a recipe for massive disaster. And without being an alarmist, people will die if we continue on this path.
Jesse.
The obsession that the Democrats have with green energy that's untested, unscientific, and just does not work is unfathomable. And the fact that even some big corporations, big tech, and big mainstream media has gotten on board with this is increasingly unfathomable for me. There is no way we can move forward. I'm echoing a lot of the things that have been said here before. But to ban natural gas and gas in new construction and an arbitrary date when we don't have the resources or the abilities to provide that energy is ludicrous to me. For the fact that we don't even really truly know on a public safety matter on how to address the fire suppression systems with these issues on battery storage or these other green energy things is unfathomable. For me, we've seen what's happened when an electric vehicle has been stuck in a flood or in a natural disaster. It does not work, and we're abandoned there. Or at least where we have a combustible car, there's a way to get out. This is a public soundbite, a 30-second soundbite getting ahead of the science. And that's the Democrats doing it. After being told by everybody, number one, we had to follow the science when it came to vaccines. Number two, even though it's your body and we want you to do anything you want with your body, you have to take you're forced to take a vaccine before you can move into society. And now they're taking the economic choices and the personal choices away from consumers and residents on what they are to buy. They've given incentives for the purchase of of electric vehicles and such, and it has not worked. We've seen this happen time and again. When you force our society to do something, you mandate them to do something, this society will rebel because they don't trust the government.
Well, let me ask you this, Tim. When you and I were chatting at lunch, we were also talking about wind power and solar power and nuclear power. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, the big part of the problem here is we don't have the technology and the alternative energy sources at the moment to bring to scale that are going to make this be successful. So you can put up solar farms and you can put up wind farms as they're trying to do. And if you've been following this, you've seen that even the wind farms that they're trying to build are running into cost overruns and contract issues. And so you can see how this is going to get ahead of itself. What we haven't allowed is for the market to get ready to be here. And so I think when you think about advancements in hydrogen power, when you think about what's happened in the way that we produce nuclear, and so we've got a really smart scientist working for us now who's doing energy policy, and he talks about new nuclear, and he explained this in a way that really got my attention, which was the old nuclear, which has a terrible reputation. You had to contain the explosion, right? You had to contain the process that was happening. New nuclear, you have to feed it like fire. And so when you think about all of these little nuclear plants they're building all over the country, except here in New York, where they can create whole communities that get their power produced by nuclear power in a little self-contained plant that has to be kept running, which is the biggest difference between new and old nuclear. This seems like it would be a viable source for us to consider, but it is not on the table in New York right now. And so is it cheaper? Is it more reliable? Is it more productive in terms of energy output? This isn't even a conversation we're having. So until we get to that point, until we're considering all of our options, until we're not putting an arbitrary time limit on these things, I do not see a path where this bill, where these goals, where this law can be successful without monumental cost to New Yorkers.
And what troubles me, gentlemen, is as follows. It's a term of art I believe I created until it's pointed out to me that somebody else created and I've just borrowed it without giving credit. I call it the Californization of New York. You have a whole battery of feel-good green energy bills and legislation, the now the law of California, and you have the members of the state legislature, the progressive left in New York, they want to adopt those laws. Well, that's wonderful, except they have an energy crisis in California. So why would we ever want to replicate the California experience? People are fleeing. Their economy is in trouble. They have insufficient natural resources and water and energy. Why in God's name would we want to follow California over the cliff? This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jessie Garcia, the Republican Party. We've had as our guest Tim Hoefer, the CEO and president of the major think tank in New York State, the Empire Center for Public Policy. Tim, Jesse and I want to thank you very much for being here with us today. We've enjoyed this conversation immensely, and we hope to bring you back soon.
It's been great. Thanks for letting me come on.
All right, we'll be taking a break, and then Jesse and I will be back for the next two segments of Let the Record Show.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jessie Garcia.
We're back on Let the Record Show. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jessie Garcia, the Republican Party. We had with us for the first two segments of the show Tim Hoefer, the President and CEO of the Empire Center for Public Policy, a very thoughtful and brilliant commentator and an analyst of the problems that face New York City, New York State, and throughout the state and the suburbs, particularly Long Island and upstate. Now, we're switching gears. We're going to a broader canvas now. And I'll tell you what's been bothering me, and this has been bothering me since October 7th, Jesse, where you had a slaughter of innocent people, 1,200 or 1,400 people, men, women, children, infants. They cut their throats, they chopped their heads off, they put them in ovens alive, they put tires around their bodies and set them aflame. They mowed them down with machine guns. They raped the women, they dragged the naked bodies across the street. And then a funny thing happens, Jesse. Right after this happens, and all the sympathies should be given to the state of Israel and the people of Israel, within a day or two, you start having these massive demonstrations, pro-Hamas, so-called pro-Palestinian, but really pro-Hamas, saying, from the river to the sea, which anybody, except for Tlaib, that idiot, who is a voice of the Muslim Brotherhood and a voice of terrorism and hatred, from the river to the sea means the extermination of the state of Israel, Jesse. It means the extermination of every Jewish person in that community, in that state. And what is this Muslim Brotherhood? It was founded in the 1920s and 1930s in Egypt. It has a single goal. It is domination of the world by an Islamic regime which tolerates no other religion, no freedom of thought, no freedom of action. Everything is governed by this radical sect of Islam, which they impose, by the way, on their fellow Muslims, because if you don't believe the way they want you to believe, they'll chop your head off too, or throw you off a roof, or mow you down with machine gun fire, or drag your naked body through the streets. There is no tolerance. It is the worst imperialistic colonialism that you can imagine. It's full of hate, anger, terror, and what's going on all across the world, Jesse, city after city. And in this country, you see the American flag being ripped down, the Israeli flag being ripped down. There's no respect for another point of view. And this all started happening, Jesse, before Israel even went in with their incursion to Gaza to try to take out Hamas. What say you?
What occurred on October 7th, and from that point, has been nothing more than a terrorist attack against our friends of Israel. There is no other position to have if you are someone who cares about society and the rule of law, other than to stand with Israel and the people of Israel. They have a right to defend themselves just the same way as the United States had a right to defend itself from the most recent attack on her shores and September 11th in 2001. This war is not like none other. This is barbaric. This war is different to others because it comes at a time when the fault lines that divide the Middle East are rumbling. And for at least the last couple of decades, there's been a serious rift in the region's and fractured geopolitical landscape. And part of that problem is the appeasement of these type of acts, and also the appeasement of the sponsors of these type of acts. And I'm speaking of Iran, and speaking of terrorist groups that have had monies released by the United States and sanctions released from the United States. The biggest one we speak about on a regular basis is the Iran deal that allowed $150 billion of assets to be released to Iran. And then when we do hostage exchanges for $6 billion and such, those are monies going directly that fund not only the war in the Gaza, terrorist and proxy wars against U.S. soldiers and those democracies and republics that are allies of the United States, they are being funded with weapons that are funding the war in Ukraine by Russia. There is something seriously wrong with those academic institutions that encourage these types of demonstrations in support of Hamas, and then taking the victim, the true victim here, Israel, and trying to paint them as the bad guy. That's absolutely wrong. There are babies that were beheaded, babies in cages. There were women raped. There were people, innocent lives in the middle of the night that were dragged through streets. There was videos being taken and being distributed across this network of Hamas, showing how they're supportive of it, and being told to do that, and being told to target civilians, not soldiers. We have a problem with our society. If this is what we believe is right and just, it is not right and just for me. It is not right and just for common sense Americans and freedom-loving humans, people of society. This is an attack on not just Israel. It's an attack on our Western society, and America better wake up and not play the role of appeaser.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because just yesterday, Jesse, once again, the Biden administration showed that it is the appeaser-in-chief. They're once again given an extension on the waiver of the sanctions for another $10 billion to Iran to free up their money. And what do they do with that money? They do whatever they want with their money. They're proudly saying, the Ayatollahs are proudly saying, we'll do what we want. There are no restrictions. And what do they do with that money, as you correctly point out? They feed the terrorist machinery. They pay the terrorist militias. They give them the munitions. They do everything they possibly can. They make donations to American institutions and European institutions so that they create fifth columns, thought leaders, influencers in major think tanks, in universities, in the media, in the cultural centers, in the business centers, to go along with their program and to blame the victim rather than to blame the aggressor. So they use the money in a very clever way to shape the narrative, to shape the fight that's going on. And as you correctly point out, this is a fight for Western civilization. Western civilization cannot survive if we allow these people to keep doing this. And let me say this to you, which has me very upset. And you and I have talked about this in detail. You and I agree that it already exists in the fifth column in this country. The fifth column is an expression that was used during World War II about foreign infiltrators infiltrating our country. Because of the border policy, people are coming in, we don't know who they are. Cartel members, terrorists, foreign agents, they're coming in. They're bringing in the fentanyl, they're bringing in munitions. They have military-aged Chinese and Mideasterners coming in. We're being overrun by these people, and the Biden administration refuses to stop it. Now, there was an interesting discussion on last night's show on Katz and Cosby, and Alan Dershowitz, professor at Harvard Law School, who's a friend and a brilliant man, he and I have a fundamental disagreement. Alan believes that you can't impeach Biden for the failure to uphold the immigration laws or protect the border, that it's not within the scope of the Constitution. I submit to you, when we're being overrun by an influx of illegal immigration, which is causing a threat, an existential threat to this country, that we damn well have grounds to impeach Biden for failing to uphold his oath of office, which is to protect and defend this country, Jesse, the Constitution of the United States, and its laws. And to add to the fifth column problem, you have people in the Department of Justice, Department of Defense, Department of State, who are apologists for the Iranians, who carry out the agenda, and they're stooges for the Iranian agenda. And if we don't think we have a fight on our hands, because Iran is the enemy, these other guys are just the surrogates, they're the proxies. Ultimately, we have to hold them to task. And if we don't hold them to task, the war that ultimately has to be fought will be worse. Because just imagine, Jesse, if we did not confront them and they did get nuclear weapons. What say you?
I think that I completely agree with you. I think you have an entire administration under Biden that is negligent, it is disorientated, it is just plain wrong in its policies. And perhaps maybe that is impeachable or not impeachable. That's not for me to decide. But I will tell you what's impeachable, and I will tell you corruption's impeachable. I think that a full-mounted investigation has determined that there is some smoke where there is fire about Biden's business practices, and we'll get into that to another segment of our show, that is a reason to impeach him. I believe that the Attorney General has weaponized in the protection of Biden and the administration and going after parents and who challenge the school boards, naming them domestic terrorists. There's reason to do that. His actions to protect Biden and to weaponize the Department of Justice against average Americans. There's reasons to be impeached there. And then we've always had that discussion, with our good friend Eric Levine, that's where maybe the impeachment should begin. And then, of course, Secretary Mayorkas of the Homeland Security, who is responsible for the border, continues to gaslight the American people, continues to lie to the members of Congress under oath when he says that the border is under control, when what it is truly just a sieve, where tens of thousands of unvetted illegal migrants are coming through there. We don't know what country of origin they're. We don't know their status. We don't know if they're pose national security danger to us. But we do know that fentanyl through China is being carted through there. We know human trafficking and drugs are being carted through there through cartels and such, and we do nothing. This administration is full of impeachment opportunities. I'm not sure if the country is ready for that, but that it certainly is there when it comes to Attorney General Garland and, of course, the Homeland Security Mayorkas. But I also believe that a strong view has to be taken on President Biden himself. It's important because the rules and laws of this country are not being followed. You can have bad policy, and that's what you clean that up by the ballot box. But when you are thwarting the rules and regulations and laws and the constitutional rights of this nation and her people, that's when decisive action from the Congress needs to be taken.
I agree with you, Jesse. We have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in a moment for our final segment and more interesting conversation.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. We're back for our fourth and final segment of today's show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, Jesse, let me ask you this. You talked about in the last segment about the Justice Department going after parents objecting to critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and those left-wing agendas. And there's a funny thing on the way to trying to protect our border. The mayor of the city of New York, Mayor Eric Adams, called out the Biden administration for failure to enforce the borders and the cost it's creating to all the different places across the country, but particularly to New York City, because it's unsustainable. They do not have the physical space or the money or the resources, the educational institutions or the hospitals or the food. The numbers are staggering. The budget deficits are going to be overwhelming in New York City. And so Adams, on a trip down to Washington to talk about the crisis facing the city and other cities with other mayors, has to turn around and come back because one of his chief fundraisers has just had her home searched by search warrant by the FBI and the Justice Department. And now they're leaking all over the place that they seized Eric Adams' iPad and two of his cell phones and looking at him. The question becomes, is this a coincidence, Jesse, or is this another manifestation of the weaponization of the criminal justice system against political opponents? They did this literally overnight against Eric Adams. I'm still waiting for something to happen against Joe Biden's wonderful son, Hunter, who's involved in this influence peddling scam with his brother, the president's brother, Jim, and maybe implicating the president of the United States as well. They haven't moved on that, Jesse. They allowed the statute of limitations to run, but all of a sudden they're jamming up Eric Adams because he had the courage, perhaps, to speak out against the destruction of our country through an open border. What say you?
Well, I mean, I don't believe in coincidences, but I mean, I guess, like you said, there's a difference of application of justice in the United States. If you're Joe Biden or his family member, you know, you get a sweetheart deal that a good judge throws out. If you're an opponent of Joe Biden who speaks out against him, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, in defense of your communities, what do? You get nearly 100 federal agents executing search warrants and conducting interviews at a dozen locations almost simultaneously at 6 a.m. And one of those locations was Brianna Suggs, the head of Adams' campaign fundraising operations, as they looked into his connections with the Turkish government. You know, listen, corruption is corruption. What this tells me is that the Biden administration has weaponized the Department of Justice. The fact that they would hold something like this and not execute it until there was a reason for them to do that, like an attack upon them by the mayor of the city of New York, just demonstrates how criminal of an enterprise they are running in the Department of Justice. And they're besmirching the reputations and the good work of line attorneys and line FBI agents being put in a bad position because the leaders of these organizations are being used as political pawns. This is wrong. However, corruption is corruption. If you're going to root it out, you have to root it out. I believe that whether it doesn't matter what political pedigree you may have, if there's corruption amongst a Republican, I want it to be rooted out. If they don't represent the Republican Party. They represent a greedy part of it. Same way that whatever in the Democrats, except it seems to be more prevalent in the Democrats as they utilize the government coffers as their personal piggy bank, and many of them have gone to jail. But this is wrong. But then when you see this tip of this corruption and the use of this, it makes you're not surprised when you see issues like they're plaguing our city. Unemployment and underemployment are plaguing our cities. Crime is plaguing our cities here. Racial discrimination is plaguing our city. Increased cost of living because they're paying for basic needs like food, shelter, and health facilities are causing poverty amongst the middle class.
And Jesse, let me ask you this. What about this? The Democratic Party's alliance with left-wing extremists, anti-Semites, radical extremists. This is a threat to America. They're apologists for terrorism. They've abandoned world leadership. They've created national disunity. And they're making the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism acceptable. What do you say?
I think you're absolutely right. The Democratic Party, both here in the state and throughout the country, has been hijacked, has been taken over by the extreme left progressives wing of this party. They have done it far more effectively than any extremist group there is. The Democrats and like the members of the squad at AOCs, they may have their bullhorns and their partners in the mainstream media and in big tech, but nothing more is demonstrated that they have destroyed the brand of the Democratic Party with their extremism than it can be demonstrated here locally and throughout the state of New York. People are leaving the state of New York. People are fleeing the city of New York. And we are facing that crunch both economically, from a housing point of view, and a public safety matter.
Well, this has been Let the Record Show. Thank you very much, Jesse. It's been a great show. It's good to have you back. I'm glad you're feeling better. And I once again want to congratulate you and Ed Romaine and the other winners out in Suffolk County and Nassau County for having strong leadership, countervailing voices, common sense, because we need it desperately. We're not getting it from the Democratic Party. We are getting it from people like you and Joe Cairo and Ed Romaine and Bruce Blakeman. And by the way, Bruce Blakeman was down at that 300,000 march in favor of Israel and America yesterday in Washington. We had Bruce on the show. We're very proud of him, and we're proud of our friends and neighbors out on Long Island. Thanks again, Jesse. Look forward to being with you again next week on Let the Record Show.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor, or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.